Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 30 of the Hot Path Show. I'm Johnny, and today I am joined by none other than.
Is this going to be a thing now? Is that where we're
I
at?
guess it is a thing, and I have it on repeat though.
Oh, hi.
Welcome in, Danny. How's it going today?
Yeah, pretty good, pretty good.
Excellent, excellent. Well, yeah, so today we have another episode of the Hot Path Show where we talked about solving problems in game development using data-oriented design. In today's video, the main topic that I wanted to bring up is I recently had the opportunity to participate in a Blackthorn Prod collaboration challenge. They're kind of a YouTube group where they do a lot of collaboration things. Their kind of big one is, some number of developers make a game without communicating. And right now they're doing a big challenge of 100 developers make a game without communicating. And I was dev number 75. So they're basically doing it like in episodes of chunks of 25 developers at a time. So I was the last developer of episode 3. And I ended up doing some dot stuff, of course. So just kind of wanted to share a little bit more of the technical details about what I did there because I only had, about a minute to kind of explain what I did in the actual video that went live. So I think it'd be fun to kind of go into a little bit more of the technical details in here. But with that, we can go ahead and just go over a quick couple miscellaneous announcements. One thing that I do want to mention is we're about 3 weeks away from Unity's annual Unite event happening this year in Barcelona. Of course, myself and then my other two co-hosts on the Hot Path show, Danny and Tobias, are both going to be there. And of course, Danny, you're going to be giving a talk. So why don't you give people just a quick little reminder about what your talk is about?
Yeah. So I'm actually going to Unite. Finally got to announce that. And I'll be doing a talk. The talk is called Connecting the Dots, Let's Make a Game in Entities. And the reason for that is that the idea is that it can be sort of hard to learn a new pattern, ECS, all that. So why not try to make it more visual and make it also more practical? So let's actually make a game, use it as like a springboard to learn the tool set and give you all the different tools that you need to understand and all the like words that we use. And then that's what we explain, the different concepts, go over them each, individually. So you gain that tool belt and you get all the words that you need. And that's what the talk is really about. Trying to be as visual, practical as possible. And hopefully by the end of it, you have enough tools that you can start making your own ECS game at home, or at the very least have enough terminology that you can start researching at home how to do it.
And all those kind of concepts start to seem a little bit more familiar, a little more approachable, and kind of start to make sense to you. Yes. So is it an hour-long talk, by the way?
I think that's the plan, yeah. So hopefully they've given us that time slot. Otherwise, it's going to be.
Well, I think they just announced the scheduling for it, so maybe it will be on there.
Hopefully it is.
So. So once again, if you're going to be at Unite, we'll all be very excited to see you there. And I'm sure as we get closer, we'll have a little bit more details on kind of some of the specific things about, what we're all going to be doing and everything like that. So next up, I do want to share that the Unity Asset Store is still kind of hosting a big summer sale right now. So in the previous couple weeks, they did kind of each week they invited a number of creators to hand select a bunch of assets that were will be going on sale for that week. And then right now it's kind of the final 2 weeks portion of that where it's like the best of portion of the sale. So all the best of selling assets throughout the previous 4 weeks are all on sale. So we have all the assets that I hand selected here, and it looks like actually I think all of them are on sale, except for some reason the Agents Navigation Crowds expansion didn't quite make it into the best of assets, although I do think that it is a really good asset. So otherwise, all the assets that I've been talking about, and I made a little video that's available on the YouTube channel where I kind of showcase how all these assets could be used to create a city builder type game. So these are still all 50% off, and these are going to be 50% off again for the next 2 weeks. Well, it actually would better be about a week and a half because they start the week, or they start like the week of the sales on a Wednesday. So you have basically until like the Wednesday after next to still pick these up. By the way, we got Tobias's asset on here, the fake interiors asset, and yeah, a lot of good other stuff in here. So definitely go check that out. There'll be a link to my page kind of down in the description below. Also, another cool thing that I wanted to point out is Cinti Studios actually released a new pack literally just the other day. This is the Ancient Egypt pack. I'm definitely a big fan of the Cinti Studios assets, and I think just the Ancient Egypt aesthetic is super cool. So I do just want to call that out. It is available right now on a discount through their own website. Again, I will have a link to that down in the description of this video. It should be available in the asset store sometime, but it's probably still waiting for approval because the link that they have to their asset store page doesn't look like it's quite working yet. But it is available through their website. And all these assets work with Unity as well as Unreal. So yeah, very cool stuff there. So that is about it for the kind of miscellaneous announcements. And real quick, I do just want to mention that you can support us over on Patreon if you do want to, for additional support if you like what we're doing over here. And we do provide you some extra bonus episodes. So recently I did a review of all the Unity Dots packages, just kind of like going over my thoughts about what the current state of them is, and what I would like to see things changed in the future and all that. And then I'm going to be creating some new videos. So I'll have a video going out next week about just kind of like my current state or current thoughts on the current state of kind of the VR industry. Because I've been kind of doing some little bit of VR client projects and stuff lately. So just kind of have some thoughts on that I'd like to share. And also do have a monthly Q&A for people at the L2 cash tier and up. So today when this video goes live, I will be posting kind of a request for questions, and then probably the following weekend I'll be actually recording that all. So yeah, that's kind of what we got going on there. So yeah, let's get into a couple more relevant topics here. One thing that I do want to bring up is I have a little error correction code from last week, just a little context from something that we brought up, because last week someone in the chat had mentioned something about the Pascal programming language, and I kind of made the joke of like, oh, I only program in Turbo Pascal. So I actually did a little bit more research on this because I wasn't actually sure what Turbo Pascal actually was. I'm like, what's the difference between Pascal and Turbo Pascal? So Turbo Pascal is actually an IDE and compiler for the Pascal programming language. So Turbo Pascal isn't, a separate programming language itself. And then you'll find this interesting. Turbo Pascal was developed by a Danish developer called Anders Hejlsberg. That's Hejlsberg.
Is that by chance the same guy that made C?
He also made Turbo C.
Yeah.
Which is basically, from what I understand, an IDE and compiler for the C language.
Yes.
But yeah,
I mean, there's generally, I don't know, for whatever reason, there's a theme with Danes and languages, like making languages. I guess it's because we have our own weird one. But like, there's Bjarne Stroustrup, obviously the maker of C++.
Okay, he's Danish.
Yeah. There's I can't remember his name. There's the guy that made TypeScript. He also made C Sharp, I think. He's also Danish. And then there is some relation between what's it called, C and Danes, but it's not directly that.
Okay.
But yeah, a lot of fairly big languages. TypeScript, I think most people do know. C Sharp, most people do know. Here, I would assume so.
I would hope so.
And C++, I think people also know. So.
All right. You guys are doing stuff over there in Denmark.
Yeah, for whatever reason, languages. Yeah, no, Anders, designed by Anders Heilsberg. That's C Sharp. C Sharp was designed by Anders Heilsberg.
Wow.
Isn't that the guy that you just named?
Uh, Anders, Anders, and then last name
Yep.
Hejls Berg.
Yep, that's him. I just looked at the Wikipedia. It's him. Same
Wow.
guy.
So he initially designed C sharp.
He designed C Sharp. He designed and developed TypeScript and Turbo
Wow.
Pascal. He
And Turbo
yeah,
C.
and Turbo C.
Dang. It's kind of crazy how like sometimes there's just like one guy who like has done so much for the industry. Um, that's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had no idea that he was the original designer of C sharp. That's crazy. Is he still involved with Microsoft at all? Does it, if you have his page up?
Yeah, I think he still works on TypeScript, and that's what he does for Microsoft.
Okay.
Yeah. He currently works for Microsoft as the lead architect of C Sharp and the core developer on TypeScript.
Wow.
What a job title.
All right. There you go, Anders. Okay. So yeah, and then with that, we can kind of move over into some of our more ECS related topics. So here we have the cache hit Unity Dot's quick tip of the week. This one is a little bit of an interesting thing that I had kind of proposed to Danny the other day. Something kind of interesting going on that I noticed. So let me kind of pull up, and I haven't actually like implemented the solution here, but we can just kind of talk about what was going on and kind of what the solution, I guess, for this is. So I will go ahead and share this screen here. So yeah, basically what we got going on is I have a little kind of survivors project that I'm working on here. So basically we have kind of a player and some enemies, and you'll see that we just kind of have this little like whip attack that's being kind of spawned off to the side like this. So if I pause it and look at that, I got lucky, got it on the frame where the whip was spawned. So we have this little hierarchy. So I have the player entity. Under that, we have the whip entity, which kind of like controls the like timing of the attacks and everything like that. And then the actual whip prefab is kind of like the thing that gets kind of spawned under that. So basically what was happening is I noticed that if the player were to get destroyed when this whip prefab was kind of like spawned into the world, that whip prefab actually wouldn't get cleaned up. Now, the reason for that is because there's this kind of concept known as the linked entity buffer, which we've talked a little bit about in previous videos. So basically, if we go to our player, you see that we have this linked entity group. And yeah, we have a couple elements here, just kind of like going over the kind of like main hierarchy of this player entity. So this player entity, the prefab by default, has these child objects for this player attraction area as well as this whip entity. And yeah, so basically this linked entity group is, it kind of helps with entity destruction. Again, when we destroy that player entity, that destruction system, Unity is going to look through this linked entity group and also destroy any entities within this linked entity group. Is that kind of like a fair way to say that?
Yeah, no, that's entirely correct. Generally speaking, a linked entity group is just an action that when you call instantiate, we will instantiate everything in the linked entity group, and we will also destroy anything in a linked entity group.
Perfect. Sounds great to me. So yeah, you will notice that, we have kind of the player entity itself, the whip entity, and this player attraction area. However, we don't actually have the whip prefab. And what I kind of noticed is because this whip prefab is like a separate prefab from this, regular player entity, this actually has its own linked entity group. And the only elements associated with it is this, whip prefab element itself. So yeah, it actually doesn't get like added to this top level entity. And so Danny, you were basically telling me that there's kind of like no necessarily automated way. There wasn't like some
Yes.
thing that I was missing to like kind of add this kind of lower level spawned prefab to this top level player entities linked entity group. Like I kind of have to do that just a little bit more manually. Is that right?
Yes, and essentially it's because all a linked entity group, like the thing that actually makes linked entity groups linked is that it's for like when we do baking and you bake a prefab, it specifically links all that prefab together. It's not for the hierarchy, so the hierarchy is not involved at all and doesn't even get looked at.
Mm,
Which also means that you know um, we only destroy things in the linked entity group, and so if you have a child, um, we don't look at its linked entity
right.
group.
You don't like
Um,
look through the child buffer or anything.
exactly, because linked entity groups are not supposed to be hierarchies. And in the future, we probably want to explore, a way to actually destroy an entity and it destroy the entire hierarchy. And that's the mechanism,
Right.
because that's sort of what you would expect from like a normal game object point of view. You expect, oh, if I
Yeah, yeah,
destroy
yeah,
the
yeah.
parent, then I will destroy all children.
Yeah.
But that's not actually what's happening. It's the thing that's happening is that you're destroying a linked entity group, which is also why you might be confused if you say didn't make it a prefab and you were to just destroy a game object inside your scene. If you just were to destroy a game object inside your scene, like a what's it called, baked game object, right? A normally baked game object, one that isn't a prefab. If you destroy that one, all its children won't be destroyed because that thing is not a prefab, and so it has no linked entity group.
And then also, does that linked entity group only really get added when I make this a prefab? Because I don't think I was seeing it like if I just had, like, because when I just started developing, I just had the player entity like in the scene by default and kind of like built out a hierarchy. Like it didn't have the linked entity group. I don't even think it had a child buffer on it either.
Correct. So there's two things going on there. So yeah, it doesn't have a linked entity group because linked entity groups only get added if you are a baked prefab.
Okay.
Um, as for the child buffer, we use the parent to calculate the child buffer. So a child buffer is constantly recalculated. Not every frame. We make sure that we use change versions, etc., to actually validate whether someone has changed any parent. But we do recalculate this child buffer whenever you make a change to any parent. And so it also means that we can't bake it because there was some other technical reason why we can't bake it. But we essentially can't bake it, and so there's no child buffer by default. You sort of just have to interplay mode. And yeah, linked entity groups only get added if it's a prefab. That being said, if you want a linked entity group to work inside the hierarchy and be based on that, there is a offering component
Yeah.
that you can add
I did
called the
see
linked
that.
entity group
Yeah.
offering or something like that.
Yeah.
That one will use the hierarchy and say anything below it gets added to the same linked entity group and then added to the parent baked entity.
Yes, yeah, I did end up seeing that a little bit after I kind of did that player spawning solution. I was like, oh, okay, that's good to know that we could have that as well. And yeah, it literally is just I think I can go over here and see if I could find it. Yeah, linked entity group authoring is all it is. And then the last thing that I just wanted to ask you, and so on this like child, whip prefab that I'm kind of spawning at the bottom of this hierarchy, I don't necessarily need to like remove this linked entity group, right? I can just kind of like add this entity to the top level
Yes,
player
correct.
entity group, and I don't need to worry about removing this linked entity group, right?
Yeah, correct. So the linked entity group will only ever get used by the actual entity manager functions, and it will only be used as a group on the thing that has the linked entity group. So say you call destroy entity on the one that has all the prefab, all the entities, then it will do destroy entity on all those entities, but it wouldn't do that recursively. So it wouldn't look at those entities if they have a linked entity group. And the same goes for instantiation. Instantiation only looks at the entity that you passed in, whether it has a linked entity group, and then it instantiates the things that are in that linked entity group. That also, by the way, an important factor here is also to note that it literally is, it will instantiate everything inside the buffer. So say you forget to add, the root itself, then all of a sudden you have broken normal, what you would think of instantiation, because say you had a prefab and, well, okay, for prefabs, normally linked entity groups are made, but say you had, just a thing in the editor, like we just talked about, where you don't have a linked entity group and you wanted to construct your own for whatever reason, then you need to make sure that you're actually adding the root object. If you forget to do that, then now instantiate won't actually instantiate the root object, or destroy won't actually destroy the thing.
That's funny.
I've had that happen, which is why I mentioned it.
That's kind of a weird case to get into, but it's one of those things where it's like you wouldn't realize it, and you're like, it just makes no sense. You're like, I'm instantiating the thing. Why is it not instantiating?
Yeah, no,
does it instantiate like the child objects though still?
No, there's, again, as far as like any entity manager function goes, it knows nothing about the transform system. And so there's no parent-child relation at all anywhere in our code, which means that you're only ever doing actions on linked entity groups.
Interesting. Okay.
Which is what the problem you're encountering is that, if I come from a game object sort of mindset, well, a game object, when you destroy a game object, it destroys the hierarchy. Mm-hmm. It doesn't destroy the group that it was associated with.
Right.
Whereas obviously entities does the group thing. Now, we are probably going to change this in the future.
Yeah, I'm just thinking right now.
So because it's not that intuitive, especially not to game object users.
Right, and especially if you're trying to make that link between entities and game objects a lot more close. Like, that's definitely something.
Yes. But as far as linked entity groups are concerned, they won't change. So there's a valid reason that you want to group everything that's related to a prefab or related to the thing that you want to destroy.
Yeah, certainly.
But yeah, no, it's an important consideration. And if you want to solve this case, what you can do is either you can temporarily add it to the buffer above, or you can have a cleanup component on the buffer above, and then make sure that, when the root element gets destroyed, it loops over and sees if there's any iBuffer cleanup elements, and then loop over that component and then remove it. The classic sort of scenario you do for cleanup components to actually clean it up.
Cool. Sounds good to me. We'll appreciate the additional context regarding linked entity groups and all that.
Yes.
And speaking
one thing to add, just quickly. Another nice thing about this means that you can have a flat hierarchy and still destroy the entire thing. You can actually, like, say you destroy a player and you want to destroy the player camera with it. Oftentimes you end up with a player camera that's not attached in hierarchy to the player, and so you want those two to be deleted at the same time. You just put it in the linked entity group. It's as simple as that.
That's very smart, actually. I guess I didn't consider that, but I mean that totally makes sense. Yeah, if you just have additional entities that you want to be cleaned up at the same time, just add them to the linked entity group. That's smart. Yes. I'm probably gonna end up actually doing that a lot more. All right, so now we can move over into our context switch portion of the show. So here, actually, we do have a recent update to the Unity Entities package, just a small one here. It's a little bit interesting because there actually is a Entities 1.3, a couple versions of that we've spoke about on the show. So there was actually an experimental version and then a pre-release version. But the still kind of like, I guess, kind of like recommended version to use is this 1.2 version. And there's a small update to this as the 1.2.4. So Yeah, it doesn't really seem like there's too much stuff in any of the other packages, but there's a couple things in the entities packages here, so we can just kind of go through these. So debug proxies, which are used by external debuggers, were sometimes using invalid field offsets when inspecting structs in blob assets, which led to incorrect values being reported in debugger watch windows. In particular, this would be triggered by the use of bool fields in blob asset structs. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. Because, I don't think you can really inspect blob assets through the Unity editor. So you have to kind of like use some, additional external tooling, maybe through your IDE to kind of inspect those values.
Yeah, so generally speaking, there's in C# this concept of debug proxies. And a debug proxy is just like a visual view for your debugger. So normally when you inspect a value in your like C# writer / Visual Studio debugger, what you're seeing there is going to be the actual raw values. But for instance, for entities, you don't want to show just the entity. You probably also want to show chunk data, what components it has on it, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So you use debug proxies in order to do that. Now, the debug proxy that we wrote for blob assets did not do the correct thing when it came to bools. And now, I did not work on this issue. I have a feeling of what went wrong here, because fun fact, bools are not the size always that you expect them to be. They can be, usually they are actually end up being 4 bytes.
Right, yeah. Even though it's really all you need is 1 bit, but
Yeah, exactly. But it often in C# ends up being 4 bytes. And that has to do with alignment. It has to do with some other wacky shit that C# is doing. So it ends up, causing problems with fields alignment if you just use a bool. In Burst, for instance, we do support having bools, but we don't really support them on structs. We will, what's it called? There are cases where we will just straight up say, hey, use a byte instead. Inside our internal code base, actually, we never use a bool. We use a byte and then check if that value is bigger than or less than 0. It's sort of weird.
It's funny. It works.
I think, but actually, also I think even the bool 2 and bool 3 and bool 4 types that we have do it that way. They store a byte.
Okay.
They don't store. It's a little weird.
So is it like an individual byte for each bool?
You can try pulling it up. I'm actually kind of curious.
Yeah. I'll have to do this. I have to stop that first and go here. Okay, so let's go ahead and just do a little bool 4 action.
Add stage.
Oh yeah, there you go.
There you go.
So yeah, this is showing
Okay,
as bool, Marshall as unmanaged type U1.
I guess that's how we
1 byte unsigned integer.
Yes.
Okay, so it's still a bool, but then you use this Marshall as attribute.
Yeah, that's so that when we go through the marshalling layer, it's still considered as such, because during marshalling it can be considered different things.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't know that it was just a bool. Interesting. I think we must be doing something. I guess because it's specifically a type that Burst knows about, then we're not doing that, and we can just sort of do the correct thing. But normally Burst has more problems.
Sweet.
Actually, another note, now that we are looking at Unity Mathematics, I think it should be important to note that Unity Mathematics is very slow if you are not using Burst. I recently encountered someone that said, why am I only at 30 FPS? I thought 10,000 objects would be no problem. And he forgot to turn on Burst, so when he did, it became 240 FPS, so way good. And the reason for it was obviously because physics was running, and physics is implemented using Unity Mathematics. and Unity mathematics being slow, and Unity physics using almost entirely that means that now Unity physics is extremely slow because it does a lot of math operations. And so if every operation is slow, then it quickly adds up being very, very slow. So if you ever encounter any big slowdowns, make sure that you burst compile your Unity mathematics code. I sadly can even recommend just sticking to built-in C# mathematics if you are planning to not burst your code. If it's like a managed
Interesting.
path.
So it's like noticeably slower than C#'s built-in mathematics.
Yeah.
Interesting. Is there any reason why that is? Is just because
It's because it's written to work with burst, and so it's very inlineable, but JIT doesn't really notice until you hit that path
okay.
in a specific way. So
Interesting.
it ends
So
up
it's
being
really optimized for burst, but then it's almost at the detriment of it being slow in non-burst.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, for the most part, you also
idea.
shouldn't think about it that much because, if you're just using like one or two operations, then it doesn't matter. But it's mostly if you're planning on using the same math operation like in a hot path, said the name of the show.
You did the thing.
Then you should make sure that maybe use a normal math operation.
Cool. Good to know.
Anyways, sort of side trip on this thing here.
No,
But that was the
cool.
only one I did find interesting because I don't think everyone knows about debug proxies, and I do think it's a cool feature in
Yeah.
C#.
Yeah. It's good to kind of have a little bit more awareness about some of the kind of underpinnings of how all that debugging stuff works and everything. So we also have, entity versions numbers could go back to 1 after reallocation in some edge cases. So of course, entity version numbering is, each entity has an index, but those indices can be recycled. And then basically there's also a separate version number, which also increments to just basically say like, hey, this entity index 5 is different than the previous entity index 5. So we have like a different version of it.
It's specifically useful, this setup, if you have a stale reference to an entity. That's why it's there.
Yeah.
Because obviously, if you're referencing an entity that is already destroyed, and we were to reuse the same index, you don't want it to all of a sudden, that thing that referenced it, to start using that new
Point
index.
to a different entity. Yeah.
Exactly. So we like the thing that kept that reference still kept the version number of the old thing, while the new one has a new version number, and so it works out great.
Right. And then, of course, that could end up leading to problems because I think a lot of the version number comparison just does is this version number greater than the previous version known? So if it recycles back to 1, of course, that could end up being a problem. So let's see. When building a content update, a temporary path was getting created in the drive root instead of the library folder. This would also cause content update builds to grow in size every time they're built. The folder is now created in the library correctly. It's just a little kind of bug there. Error in build when sprites are contained in subscenes has been removed. Do you know what that's about?
I think it was related to when you contain a managed component or a Unity object ref that has a reference to a sprite, and it not building the subscene correctly as a result.
Interesting. Okay.
From what I recall.
We also have a regression in compilation time with assemblies with lots of system methods. And entity component store leaked memory during domain reload. So just a couple things to clean up there. And then as far as entities graphics, there was just like a couple things fixed. Pink materials when causing a domain reload while subscene is opened with light mapped materials, and also fixed a entities graphics burst issue there.
I love how specific that pink material when causing domain reload, blah, 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 blah is.
When a subscene is opened with light mapped materials, specifically.
Yes. At least, hopefully that's a symbol that entities graphics is somewhat stable. if that's what they're investigating.
Yeah, I mean, seems to be. I mean, the past couple updates have been just, yeah, like pretty basic bug fixes and stuff like that. So
Yeah, yeah.
guess we'll have to wait till all like crazy animation tools get released before all the big updates to these graphics again, I'm assuming.
I see.
Yeah, so with that, I think now we can kind of move over into our main portion of the show. We call the instruction set here. So yeah, here again, I'm going to be showcasing a little bit. Actually, I could probably still show this a little bit here, just the actual video here. So yeah, again, this is the Blackthorn Prod channel. Of course, pretty popular game dev channel where they do a lot of different collaboration videos. I've had the opportunity to participate in a couple of them. So they recently asked me to be dev number 75, again, of their 100 dev challenge. So they basically have 3 episodes out there for the first 25 developers, then developers 26 through 50, and then now just a few days ago they released this one, which is developers 51 through 75. So ended up is turning out into a pretty cool, interesting little game. Of course, you can see kind of some of the stuff playing on the screen here, but I'll go ahead and pull up the actual project here. But basically, it's kind of like I guess you could categorize it as like a wizard shooter type game. So yeah, basically we have this here. And yeah, I wonder how much I should go into depth on this here. Let me just kind of give you guys a little preview here of kind of what this game is like. So basically, it's gonna load. So yeah, it's kind of like a first-person shooter type game, and then the idea is you kind of have these like different spells of things that you can do. So if we actually go in here, we can kind of choose the different spells. So I kind of like this one here. It's the green one. Eat your greens. This is kind of like a fully automatic one. And the idea is you have these different spells, and you can kind of like choose from them. And then your kind of little hand changes in the corner, and then from here you can kind of like shoot these different spells at different enemies. So yeah, kind of fun little game, and it's working pretty well, and kind of impressive considering how many developers have been involved in this project here so far. So yeah, just a quick little overview on the game. So yeah, I kind of got it in the state where it kind of had already some of the levels built out, and yeah, you'll see that if we actually go into this kind of level selection screen here, they did have a total of 5 levels here, but one of the levels was basically just kind of like an endless practice stage. So what I decided to end up doing is, actually I should probably pull up the main menu here. So on this main menu, you'll see that I have this kind of practice stage here that you can kind of link off to. And then it kind of starts off similar here. And then you basically go out into here. You can kind of pick which spell you want. So I'll get the green spell here. And then, so yeah, you basically go through here, and then you kind of you battle like these like endless waves of enemies. So what I kind of decided to do is I wanted to kind of like ramp up this a little bit, or even a lot of bit. So I basically, again, yeah, broke this off into the practice stage that you can access through the main menu. But I still wanted this level to be part of kind of the core game. So I ended up turning this into a little bit of a bonus stage here. So we can go to the bonus level, which is, nope, that's the folder. Bonus level. So I wanted to use a little bit of fun ECS stuff here to kind of ramp it up a little bit. So now you'll see that we can go through here. And yeah, I couldn't actually get all the spells working with ECS in the time that I had, so I only have 2 spells to choose from, but we still have this little green spell here. But yeah, so basically now we have just like all these like gnomes that start popping up here. So I think that end up going up to like 1,000 these different gnomes. Basically, it's a bonus stage, so you have max health and max mana, and then you see at the top there's kind of like a little timer running, and then of course, you know, as you destroy all these gnomes, your score goes up and up and up. So it's just a, you know, kind of like fun little level to, you know, just kind of like low stress, destroy all these little gnomes here. So yeah, I decided to use ECS for this, and I think there's kind of some interesting topics that we can go into, because of course this project was not built with ECS in mind at all. Of course, it was built out with, you know, Unity's regular game object-based stuff, because that's what you know, pretty much all these developers are most familiar with. So then, you know, I kind of had to do some interesting things to integrate with the existing code base and get that all working with ECS. So yeah, what do you think of the game so far?
I mean, that's a lot of gnomes. It's interesting. I love it. I remember watching, like, I think I've watched the first episode way back when that came out. Interesting to see how far it's gotten.
Yeah.
I'm saying.
Yeah, I was watching through all the episodes last night, because actually that was one thing that like I had a feeling that I was going to get tapped on at some point to participate in this 100 devs challenge. So I hadn't been watching any of the episodes at all. So I literally had zero idea of what this project was. Had, you know, absolutely no context of what anyone was trying to do. So yeah, I just kind of, you know, open up the project, and I mean, it's pretty far along. Of course, you know, after 75 developers have been working on it, and, you know, literally hundreds of hours of development time at this point. So yeah, I kind of was like figuring out what I should do, and I'm like, well, you know, let's have a little bit of fun with ECS here. So the first thing that I do want to mention, actually, yeah, we do have the bonus level open here. The first thing that I do want to open or mention, and I talked about this on, I think, a previous video. I can't remember if this is one that I just ended up doing by myself, but it was kind of interesting because this project is using Unity's built-in render pipeline and not like, you know, URP or HDRP or anything like that. And that ended up, I didn't realize that at first, and that almost ended up being a little bit of a problem because, of course, Entity's graphics basically uses URP to, you know, render 3D objects and stuff like that. So I ended up having to, like, let's see if we go into our prefabs and ECS, I have this kind of GNOME entity here. We have the renderer on it. So I ended up having to use the sprite renderer. And so I believe this works because the sprite renderer is a managed component, right?
Well, it's a companion component.
Component, yeah.
Yeah. It's on the set of, you know, there's a list somewhere in our code that says, hey, if you are a light, a sprite renderer, and some other weird things that I can't remember.
I think particle systems or...
yeah, particle systems, I think, is one of them.
Yeah.
Then at that point, we create a ghost object and we sync the transform. Similar to what I normally recommend on the show as well. But just done for you.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you mean like for doing like animations and stuff like that, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, and actually it was kind of interesting because I think I was like, oh, okay, well, I don't need the entity's graphics package, so I just removed the entity's graphics package, but the sprites weren't rendering, so I'm like, okay, well, that's weird. Let me just put the entity's graphics package back in, and then it seemed to be rendering fine. So I'm not really sure.
So yeah, the reason for that, I think, is that it all the companion objects are defined in graphics
okay.
or something like that. So
okay.
Yeah. It's not that it
Interesting.
actually uses entities graphics to render. It's more that it needs some of the
Yeah,
baking
there's
from
just
the.
kind of some plumbing stuff in there that helps it all. So yeah, I thought that was kind of like an interesting thing because I kind of like it was like kind of brainstorming what I wanted to do and kind of like came up with this whole idea and everything, and then of course brought all the ECS packages in, kind of started doing some ECS stuff, and then like quickly realized as I went to render 3D objects that it wasn't actually rendering 3D objects, but it ended up working out because um, a lot of the because the enemies are already this kind of like 2D flat style, kind of like in the game, kind of almost like a like a Paper Mario looking kind of thing, where they're basically just these flat objects that kind of rotate to face towards the player and everything. So yeah, that kind of ended up working out. So yeah, these entities for the enemies are just completely new. They're different than all the additional enemies that had been created. So yeah, basically we just kind of have the gnome entities right now. And then you can see, I kind of like a physics shape, physics body, just so they can kind of, handle the collisions with the different attacks that we're shooting out, and the sprite render. So they're just kind of, pretty basic here. So the next thing that I probably should mention is kind of the player. The player kind of has a companion entity associated with it. So you'll see that in our entity scene, we just have a player entity right here. And if we open this up, so yeah, you can see that we just have basic stuff like a player tag. We do some we have an initialized player tag here, and we have a iComponent data for how many points that you're scoring in the bonus level. And then we also have a Unity object ref transform, which is going to basically point to the player's transform. So we just kind of add all these components in this authoring here. We don't need to set any values. We're just basically literally adding components at this point. So in our initialized player system, what we need to do is wait until we have the initialized player tag, of course, here. Inside the on update, the player was already set up as a singleton. Someone kind of did this before. Again, this is just kind of the regular player game object. So in the on update, we're just going to make sure that the player singleton has actually been created here. Once we're sure that it has, then we can go ahead and actually get a reference to our player entity, which should also be created because, of course, we have the require for update on this initialized player tag here. And then what we end up doing is we add this player transform reference component, and we set the value to the player's transform, and that's the game object player. So now our entity player has a reference to the game object player's transform. And then of course we can just remove the initialized player tag because we don't need to run that initialization logic again. And then super simple, what we would do here is we just have a system that updates before the transform system here. And all this does is it's basically just looks at the player's transform value. Of course, if it's null, then we just kind of end up continuing out of here. If the player gets destroyed, we don't need to, move the entity position. It doesn't really matter at that point. But what we're doing here is we're just moving this, entity player to match the game object player. So this is, kind of similar to what you were saying about having a companion object, but it's just like the opposite of that. So in this case, we have the game object player kind of driving the transform, and then we have our entity player following that. Again, because the main player has been all built out with Unity game objects, so I didn't want to, mess with changing that and creating this whole new player entity or anything. We just kind of have this player entity following the game object entity.
Quick question: is there any reason that you didn't just use a managed component? Like you can use what's it called, the transform directly. You don't have to have a intermediate.
Like instead of doing the Unity object ref, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So this is actually more expensive right now because you have to dereference it every single time. You have to look it up every time. Whereas if you also, it's just more complicated code.
That's true. That's true.
Whereas you can actually just add the Unity engine transform to your player entity, and then
Right. And
get that in
actually
your
just
query below.
to show that what that would look like here would be like public class player transform managed.
Nope. No. We don't even need. We don't need a managed.
Need a creative component here.
We don't need a managed component because the Unity engine transform is already a valid managed component.
Okay. So then you're saying here we would do manager dot add component object to the player entity, and then here you're saying we could just do player dot instance dot transform like that.
Yes.
And then when in the on update here, then would this just be?
So this is where it gets a little wacky. System API.managed API.unity engine component.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So system API. .managed API. .unity engine component of type transform.
Okay.
And now you can do. You still need to do .value, but that's it. You don't need to do .value. Because that value is the transform.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So I guess I didn't know that. I don't think I've used the system API managed API Unity engine component like that. So yeah, you saw that my first instinct was to create a managed component. Which still would have worked, but again, that's just kind of like an extra
layer,
value, right?
Yeah, exactly. But at least the managed component would also technically be more performant than Unity engine object.
Gotcha. Yeah, I guess it wasn't like necessarily a conscious decision. It's more I was just kind of like in the habit lately of doing the Unity object ref stuff.
Yeah, and that's generally a good habit to have. It's just when your only intent is to ever use that component for like a per frame update, then like the performance you get out of it suddenly makes no sense. Say you were to change the value of the value, like you just wanted, you could keep something still bursted because you can use player transform reference in your code, then it suddenly does make sense to use a Unity object ref instead.
Okay. Cool. Well, that's a nice little tip there. But yeah, so yeah, again, basically we're just kind of using the player game object to drive the player entity. So then, yeah, I kind of talked a little bit about the enemy entities. And again, we just kind of have some simple little authoring components on here. Most of this stuff is just kind of like related to movement speeds. You'll see there's kind of like some rising properties. So basically it kind of like, they kind of rise up through the ground, so they don't just kind of like spawn randomly. They kind of, spawn under the world and then, rise up to the playing field here. So, we set all that stuff in the authoring and Baker and all that. And the enemy movement system, we kind of have this first portion, which actually, rises them up out of the ground. And then we also have this, other portion, which actually moves them towards the player. So, of course, we can get the player's position here. And again, we're looking at the entity player's position here. and then yeah, just figuring out the look direction, and this is to basically have them billboard essentially to face the player.
What is the enemy rising properties? Since I'm
That
noticing you're removing that immediately as you.
Yeah, that this is kind of like that first portion where they basically rise up out of the ground.
Okay.
So they kind of have like two kind of like states. So there's the enemy rising properties. So first they kind of rise up out of
I
the
see.
ground, and then once they're up out of the ground, then they move. So they're kind of like two states that they can be
Yeah.
in.
It looks like a case where maybe an enableable component would be more performant
That's fair.
because then you don't need the entity command buffer.
True.
Uh,
Yeah, because that's all the entity command buffer is being used for.
yeah.
Yeah, and then I guess this would still work with the with
Yes.
none here. So yeah, but again, only had a few hours to work on this or so. But yeah, that's definitely a valid optimization there. So yeah, we billboard them to look towards the player, and then of course just doing some basic stuff to rotate them and move them towards the player here. So yeah, I mean, pretty simple logic. And yeah, actually, you might even notice that I don't actually have in the scene here like all the other scene geometry and all that. If we can kind of get close to this here. So yeah, none of this stuff actually has any like entity colliders on it. So you'll see that the gnomes will kind of like move through the wall and stuff, but it's like it doesn't really matter. You're not really like kind of paying attention to that. You're just kind of like shooting gnomes for a minute and a half, and then you're out of there. So
Yeah, it also I guess adds sort of a game feel to it because it's like an ominous or the gnome goes through the wall.
they like rise up through the ground, and they're like just floating through walls and all that stuff.
It's very Gravity Falls in the vibe there. If you've ever seen that show,
Actually, I don't know if I have. I'll look it up.
it's a good show.
Okay. Yeah, so yeah, now we have kind of the enemies in the stage. Now the next thing is we need to actually attack the enemies. Now this ends up being a little bit interesting because again, all the attacks are all game object based, and I don't want to, completely recreate, all the same attacks from an ECS side. So again, ended up doing kind of a companion solution here. So the way that this works is that's the wrong one. We have the projectile class here. So this is the class that is wait, huh? Oh, okay. So yeah, this is the class, this like kind of game object class that manages these different projectiles that get shot out into the world and everything. So what I'm doing here is there's all kinds of crazy object-oriented programming stuff in this class. We have hierarchies of things, and it's just a nasty web of things to untangle. And then you remember there was 74 devs before me who I can't talk to, so I have to kind of figure out all this on my own. So yeah, we have this base magic shooter class. So yeah, when this projectile gets created, it kind of does some things on here, and then I have this initialize ECS step that I created. Basically, I'm just doing something super simple here. So I just do a player query, create a player query. Again, this is probably not the most efficient because this happens on every single projectile that gets spawned, but again, it's like one projectile every half second or something like that. So it's not really that big of a deal. But yeah, so we create this player query. We just look for anything with this player tag. We just say if the player query is empty, then we return. Basically, we're not using ECS in the scene, so we don't need to create a companion entity here. Do you have any thoughts on kind of this
I mean, yeah, no, it's obviously the rest of the project was going to be very object oriented, badness and inheritance, and
Yeah.
oh my god, I can't even imagine. Like I'm noticing also the set shot direction and the set speed. I would never do it. Like that's
No. Oh no. Yeah, there's so much just stuff out there, and there's some other silly things that maybe we'll get to a little bit later on as well. So yeah, anyways, we just kind of, yeah, essentially check if there is an ECS player. And then if that is, then we know that we're kind of like in that bonus stage. So I have this kind of function on the projectile creation system, which I call. So first get the, do it a get existing system managed here. And then we do create new projectile and we pass in the game object here. So this projectile system, yeah, I can kind of show you. We just have projectile tag, projectile reference. Again, I'm using the Unity object ref here again. Projectile damage is, how much damage points it should deal to the enemies. And then we kind of have this little hit buffer set up, which I have kind of showed off quite a long time ago in some of the earlier episodes of the Hot Path show, where, yeah, basically we can kind of use this hit buffer to apply damage to different entities, essentially. So yeah, we have this projectile creation system, the create new projectile here. By the way, this is a system base, and I did that so I can do the get system managed and call functions on it here. Reason I'm doing this through a system is because I want access to some of the system API and easy access to the entity manager and all that stuff there. So basically the create new projectile prefab, it's going to go ahead and get a reference to that entity prefab of this projectile base. We're going to go ahead and instantiate it. We'll set a name for it. We'll go ahead and add the Unity object ref transform for that game object projectiles transform. There's a couple different types of colliders that it can have. So it can either be a sphere or a box collider. I noticed these different projectiles have. And then so basically with that, I am creating a collider here, and then just kind of adding that component on there. So either a sphere collider or a box collider. And if it doesn't have any, then I guess it's not adding either. And then, yeah, so with that, then, yeah, we make sure we add the physics world index. And then we can also add a projectile damage component. And then we can do a get component on the projectile object, get the damage from that to know how much damage should be added to that projectile. So it basically
Did you also create the entity at this point? Like
yeah. So
okay.
In this step right here, I'm doing an entity manager instantiate.
Oh, instantiate, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the reason I ask is I'm noticing a lot of add component data, and it's such an anti-pattern. It hurts whenever I read it, because it's like, okay, let's take the entity and let's move it, and then let's move it again, and
That's
let's move it,
yeah.
and then add a shared component, let's move it again. So it's just such an anti-pattern. I generally recommend add all the components up front, and then afterwards,
right? Yeah.
You can set the component data.
Again, good point.
Yeah, no, I mean, you probably also had to think of all of this very fast and
exactly. Yeah. It's just kind of like, okay, got this idea for this thing. Let me go, because I only have like a few hours to basically work on this. So
yeah,
it's basically treating it like a game jam.
Exactly. Like it's a similar thing to, like, I would also in an actual production, I would still not recommend using system base even for this case, because what you can do is you can just have a singleton that you query for instead, and then that be the one that incurs the action of creating a new projectile.
Right.
So you just have it like say, oh, I need to create a new projectile with this game object, store that reference.
Like basically set a flag on that singleton, and that singleton, with that flag being enabled, it will run a system which does all this stuff, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
That's the pattern that we also use for entity command buffers, where you can just get a entity command buffer singleton and then
So then,
call the functions there.
in this case where I would want to say pass this game object in, should I basically be like setting a game object field on that singleton?
You would probably end up having a iBuffer element instead. That is your create projectile queue, and then you just do system API.get singleton buffer. I think we have a singleton buffer
I
thing.
think so, yeah.
And then you can get the queue of create new projectile, and then you would just say create new projectile on that, and then the buffer is what stores all the references to game objects using just actually a manage component would probably be the simplest.
Right.
And
Yeah.
when you actually want to instantiate it, you have a system be the one that update in its own update. It just queries for that one entity and sees if it has anything in the buffer, and then empties it and does the actions. That's the proper easiest way of doing it, at least.
No, I like that a lot. It yeah, makes a lot of sense. But yeah. So then yeah, projectile follow system. Again, this is going to be pretty similar to before, where again we're just kind of looking for that. Yeah, just setting the position and rotation based off of the projectile references position and rotation there. And then, okay, so then yeah, what I'm doing here is checking to see if that transform reference is null, which it is. Then we can kind of assume that that projectile has been destroyed. And then so we'll just add a destroy entity tag on there and have a system that kind of does that cleanup operation after that. Because yeah, again, basically the different projectiles, they kind of have like a lifetime, or they like hit a wall and get destroyed. So then this kind of destroys them at the same time.
Yeah. Did you watch our video on entity command buffers? I'm noticing just such a lot of entity command buffers.
I'm a big entity command buffer guy, I guess.
I can tell. I can tell.
Why? What would you say? Are you kind of say go with some flags?
An enableable components sort of person.
I've been coming around on them lately. I've been in that little survivors project. I've been doing some interesting things with enableable components, and again, because this survivors project, I have a little bit more time to kind of like think about things rather than just go with my natural instinct of, oh, entity command buffer, add a component, let's go.
Yeah. No, but it's sort of interesting because, like, if you look at a game object game, nobody really does any structural changes ever. You don't like add a component to a game object normally.
Right. Yeah.
So it in a way it's almost like people that have learned entities do get away from that like entirely, and then start adding all the components, always doing structural changes,
yeah,
and forget completely that part of it. Which I find interesting.
Yeah.
Obviously, there is a case to be made where entity command buffers might be useful. Like, for instance, the case you have right here. I think we talked about it in the initial entity command buffer video as well, where it's like, okay, if you only once in a few moons end up with a destroy entity tag, then it truly doesn't matter. But say it does end up being like a frame where you have 1,000 of those destroy entities.
Well, I mean, that actually does end up happening. I think at the this would be,
because then you're obviously gonna end up creating 1,000 of those commands just to do the action, and then like fragment all those chunks, and like it will do those actions individually.
right.
It's actually fairly bad. Whereas if it was just an enableable component, it would obviously just have been a flag that you either have on or off.
So,
and it would only actually be slower on the systems where you actually query for that component.
yeah. So I'm not even doing a add component for entity query. This is when the game ends. We want to destroy all the gnomes, and then so yeah, I'm literally going through each of these, doing an ECB add component, destroy entity tag on every gnome entity.
Yeah, yeah.
So literally what you just said.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, that hurts. And the interesting thing here is what you could have done that would be more performant if you weren't thinking in entity command buffer terms. Try typing state.entity manager and then using add component, then adding the destroy entity tag.
And
And
pass an
then you
entity
take
query
your
here.
system API query and you copy that down there without the with entity access bit. So yes, copy that. Pass it into there. Yes. And then instead of query, do query builder and then dot with all. With all. Yes. And then build at the end. This works. And this is more efficient because it's done on an archetype level. And you wouldn't have to, store a whole buffer where you're constantly adding things to the buffer as a command, and then later on you will be doing add component on every single one of those commands, and you will move the what's it called, every individual entity every single time. It's a whole thing.
Yep.
Like this would at least be more performant.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I guess.
And technically less to type.
Yeah, true. Yeah, no, I like that approach. I don't know why I didn't think of doing the add component for entity query, because that's just kind of the obvious solution. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I guess when it comes to like flags, I feel like it would be a little bit weird to have like a destroy entity flag on an entity that like doesn't need to be destroyed. But I mean, I guess if you see that it's like unchecked, then I don't know.
Well, yeah, no, it depends on so many factors. I personally just default to a setup where I never ever do any structural changes. That way, I end up oftentimes packing my entities better than I would have if I were to always add and remove components, because that's the sort of thing that completely fragments your chunks. It is a different approach. Obviously, you can argue for which is better. I think in a lot of cases it is better to just not add components, and so therefore I do recommend just defaulting to, use enableable components, even if it is to destroy an entity. And then it's just like you have an enableable component called is alive, and then as long as it's alive, you don't think about it. But the time that it is, and the thing about enableable components is you only actually filter over them if you need that component, which you would only need for the actual systems that are changing that value. So like filtering it is fairly cheap. You can even, like, on your common case, the jobs that check for distance or check for anything being hit, those sort of jobs that just needs to do it every once in a while, those can just say, hey, I'm not going to check this flag being there, but I'm still going to get the enableable ref to it so that I can change the flag. Therefore, you don't get the cost of the enableable components, but you at the same time still can change that value. And because you can now change the value, you can have another system just query for that enableable component being there. And that would actually have to incur the cost, but the cost is fairly cheap. And it could do chunk operations, which is the important bit here.
Yeah, definitely. One other thing on enableable components, let's say this end bonus level tag was actually a flag, meaning it was a enableable component. So in my testing, what I was actually just doing the other day, it seems like this when we do this require for update, this basically
Yeah.
returns true if an entity with that component exists, even if that is disabled.
Yes, correct. So if you actually look at the implementation of require for update, try going into it. What you will notice here is that let's look at okay, builds the query, blah blah blah, then require for update.
Go into here.
Yeah. Does it really not show there? I guess it doesn't. It's the place where it actually uses it. So actually require entity queries. Go into that.
This method ignores whether the component is enabled or not.
Yeah, we added a comment for it. We did add a comment for it. But if you also notice require entity queries, go into find where that's being used.
This here.
Yeah.
Find where it's being used.
Yeah.
You okay over there?
Yes, and then should run system. Scroll down a little.
This here.
Yeah. You can see is empty ignore filter.
There it is.
Yeah. And also, by the way, this is the implementation of require for update. It's simply just looping over every single entity query that it stored and checking if it is empty. It's not doing anything fancy. It's literally
funny. That's funny.
Yeah, it's just a utility.
So I guess, is there, if I wanted, maybe could I modify this package to not ignore the enabled disabled state?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it would obviously have a performance impact in
because
some
it's got to
cases.
do that additional check, essentially, like.
Yeah, if there's an enabled, so the additional check would be if there's an enableable component, then it would have to check literally every chunk, and then it can know.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, but I mean that should still be pretty quick because it's basically just either a 0 or not 0 for the enabled bits on the chunk, right?
Yes. There is also another thing here, which is that you would have to complete any jobs that use those enableable components, which is the gotta be the actual expensive bit. Like if it's just checking,
wouldn't that be true for just like any other regular component though?
No, because any other regular component, you can only change that on the main thread.
Oh, I see.
So the count is updated normally there.
Okay.
Whereas here, obviously, the count can't be updated ahead of time. It can only be whenever the job is complete.
Okay, that makes sense. Cool. Okay, what else did I have here? Okay, well, so here's where things start to get a little silly. I just kind of wanted to show you about how, again, working on a project that 75 people have worked on where there's been no communication.
Yes.
Definitely leads to some interesting decisions and how those decisions can kind of compound upon each other, how there was a little bit of strange things to kind of start with, and then like when I wanted to kind of integrate my stuff in there, I just kind of compounded the problem even further here. So yeah, so we have this kind of level selection scene here where, basically what's happening here is we have kind of this thing where we can kind of select the different levels. We get a little kind of like preview of kind of what's going on here and all this. So you'll see that, so yeah, when I got the project initially, it was levels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this stage here was level 4, but again, it was just kind of like an endless stage, so it wasn't really like kind of like fit in like the linear thing of the game. So then I was like, okay, well, I'll turn this into a bonus stage, but then I thought it would be kind of weird to have the bonus stage after level 3 because level 4 is just kind of, I'll show you this one in a sec because there's something funny in here. Level 4, it's basically you just kind of like walk through it. It's not really like there's no enemies or anything like that. So wanted to put the bonus stage kind of like in the middle of the action a little bit to kind of break things up. So yeah, I had to do some kind of crazy stuff to get this all to work out. So we have this 1 2 B 3 4.
That's how I count. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. You don't count in hexadecimal.
And skip some letters and.
Yeah, all of a sudden get to B, and then yeah.
Yeah, we used to use runes here in Denmark, so.
Okay, so you'll see what's going on here is we have this level data manager. So all the levels are stored by the level string name, the string name of the scene here. So these are kind of like the order that the different levels are in. So I mean that's fine or whatever. Obviously there are better ways to do that. And then we have references to all these buttons, the different visual objects, and all this. I'm trying to remember exactly where all the weird stuff gets in. And then there's all this stuff going on with player prefs, and we have these like global levels here, and I think it kind of uses some strings of, I can't remember if it's the exact, I think it's the level name. It must be the level name that is kind of like stored in the player prefs to determine if you've unlocked that level or not. This might take a sec for me to find, but there was another kind of like really gross thing that I had to do to get the levels to print out 1 2 B 3 4, because those aren't just like static object buttons.
Hurts.
I know. Because what ended up happening is I think it's like tied to like
the name of the object or something.
Well, no, it's like literally like it takes some like actually maybe we can go into this canvas here, and so level selection buttons. So here where we have the level selection buttons. Okay, so on each of these, someone made a generic button script, by the way.
Oh yeah, of course.
And then so on here we have level index, level name, level scene string stored in a separate place than the other level scene string, and then the level scene description. So we have level index 0 for level 1, level index 1 for level 2, level index 2 for the bonus stage, which is the one that I created. And then now we have level index 3 for level 3 and 4 for the final level here. So let me see if I can figure out where this is used.
Oh, if it's 2. Yeah. Line 20.
Yeah. Here you go. So I say, I'm doing the switch statement, or what it's called, switch expression or something like that.
Yeah, switch expression.
So we get the level label, which is what actually gets assigned to the button. So if it's less than 2, then level index is the level index that's in our generic button class plus 1 to string. If it's exactly 2, then we put a B, and then otherwise we put the level index.
Oh, perfect. No flaws.
So good luck to anyone else who wants to add like another bonus stage or any other stage in this game.
I'm sure someone would want at some point to make it even more generic, that level select button, and then You have
Yeah,
to have a scriptable object, and that scriptable object contains an array of all the different names, and then
exactly. So yeah, there's definitely some funny things like that going on here. So yeah, anyways, I can just show real quick the final level here, which is this Hall of Heroes. So I can just kind of go through in the scene view here. But yeah, someone kind of came up with this funny idea. So of course it starts off kind of in this like same little main room here, and then we go down here, and then we have a bunch of these little kind of chambers, and then basically all the developers who worked on the game like put their different like pets in here. So we
oh,
kind of go through and we have like all the different dogs and cats and everything like this.
what if you don't have a pet? You put in a mouse or something,
So
like your computer mouse.
someone actually we'll see that here in a sec. Yeah, putting your the rat you found in your garage. So yeah, we have a bunch of dogs and cats. Another little kitty cat. So yeah, someone put their baby in there. And then we get another cat, and then that one. So I had to add another chamber here because
Yeah.
they're all full up. So I did the null one here, and then we have my little pup Hazel right here.
Aw, cute.
So yeah, and that's basically, and then you walk through here, and then that kind of brings you to the end little cutscene, which there actually is a little end little cutscene, which is kind of funny. There's actually like good amount of kind of stuff in this game. So yeah,
Nice.
that is the Blackthorn Prod 100 devs project, 3/4 of the way through. So we still have another 25 developers to mess things up, and hopefully
I am so curious what is going to happen after.
yeah.
Because obviously not everyone knows entities or is able to use it, and so if they want
I've
to change
doomed this
anything related to
project.
this, then good luck. And I'm very curious how they will take it.
Although, yeah, so I was mildly kind to them in the fact that the bonus level manager is a mono behavior here. So this is, where we can actually check the, like here's where like the bonus level UI stuff happens, and where I'm actually like setting the number of gnomes destroyed. So, I mean,
Yeah.
you could kind of tag off of this a little bit if you wanted to kind of integrate with some things.
Also, what's up with your line numbers?
Oh yeah. This is a new thing that's going on here. So I literally did this like 2 days ago. A little bit cursed.
It is
I'm glad you noticed
confusing the hell out of me right
that.
now.
And also, look, when I put it in a breakpoint, we get 2. Or wait, I guess it only shows 2 for the preview, but only 1 there.
So it's sort of similar to like Vim.
Yeah, because
I know Vim.
I have Vim Motions installed right now. So yeah, basically what's happening here is the relative line number, which is nice to have because if I want to say delete like all these lines here, I can say D, and then you see this is 4 is what I want to delete to, so I can say D4 enter, and it deletes that. So I can kind of like use that relative line count to like copy and delete a certain number of lines.
So it is just Vim. You have installed Vim. What's the name? There's a plugin.
Yeah,
called, like
I think
Idea
it's
Vim.
Idea Vim. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, this relative line numbers is actually a separate plugin that you can get on the JetBrains marketplace.
Oh.
And there's an option where you can also show the absolute line number. And so I have that because it's also kind of like helpful to have the absolute line number, like especially if I'm like working with a client or something, and it's like, oh hey, scroll down to line 46, and there's that on there. So
Have you ever used a shortcut for going to a line number? Control G, I think.
well, in Vim, I mean, you can just do colon 24.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. But it's very important to have that. Like it's, I use going to line numbers all the time.
Yeah. No, I've been really getting accustomed to using Vim motions and not having to touch my mouse at all, which has been nice.
Do you then also do 10 finger typing?
10-finger typing?
So it's where what's it called? Your fingers are supposed to always be on the same row, like the A S D F
The
G
home row?
row exactly. So your fingers are always there, and so you're supposed to use the fingers closest to the other keys. It's a specific way of typing, but it's specifically optimized and what Vim uses for its what's it called layout. So that's the reason you have JKL as like the navigation stuff, because those keys are what you normally would have your finger on at all times.
Gotcha. So your hands are basically, or your, at least your right hand would be moved in by one key by default, essentially.
Let me remember. I think your point finger is supposed to be on like F and J.
And so that's just how it always is. Yeah, because I slide back and forth. So I have my index fingers on the keys with the bump on them. And then when I need to move, then I just slide my right hand over one key.
Yeah. And that's what you do if you don't do 10 finger typing. But normally, if you were to do 10 finger typing, then you would actually use the proper, so to say, layout.
I've never heard of this 10-finger typing.
Yeah.
I feel like that would confuse the hell out of me.
Yes.
Trying
But
to relearn that.
It is incredibly hard to learn. I have never been able to learn it. But it should supposedly only take like 30 days to do.
So just have 30 days of poor productivity and
Yeah. Just accept 30 days of poor productivity, and then out of a sudden now you should supposedly be a lot faster.
and then I go to use every other program that doesn't support Vim motions, and then I get zero benefit from it.
No. You're also going to be ultimately faster for writing speed. That's like
Okay.
10 finger typing is what's it called? The default that you would learn on a typewriter. It's also the default that you would learn for fast typing. If you want to be able to type fast, then it's usually 10 finger typing that
So
you'll
do
learn.
you use your thumbs, or why is it called 10-finger typing?
I think you use your thumb for something as well, like hitting H and G and stuff like that. It's like a part of 10 finger typing. It says like which keys are mapped to which fingers. Yeah, there's an image with the fingers corresponding to.
This here?
Ah, for fuck's sake. If you scroll up, picture number 4.
This one here?
Yeah, then you can see that like your pointer is supposed to be that row, and like I guess enter is the only thing you really use your thumbs for. No, space.
Any space?
Yes.
That
So
looks the same as normal, right?
Yeah, this is how you're supposed to hit every key. So your like little finger is supposed to hit P, for instance. I never use my little finger for hitting
I
P.
think that's what I do. I think that's what I do already.
Then you might already be fairly accustomed to 10 finger typing. Though you are supposed to also rest your hands, like the image there. The one your mouse is over. That's how you're supposed to rest your hands.
Yeah, I think I do this.
Because notice, if you rest your hands like this, then J, K, L, and are all
Yeah, but that's not
there.
the Vim motion. H is left for Vim motions.
Yeah, but that's because it's easy to do with the pointing finger. So it's supposed to be the easiest, like the quickest way to type using the 10-finger typing system. There is a mapping between 10-finger typing, which is this sort of setup, and Vim.
Interesting. Maybe I still am missing something then. I'll have to look into this.
Yes. I mean,
Okay.
there might be a chance that you're already using this, and it doesn't matter. But
Well, I definitely still am having to shift my hand over when I want to go to like move around with the HJKL.
yeah, and normally that doesn't happen if you use those fingers correctly, as shown on the image.
So they're saying you basically just keep your hands where they're supposed to be, and then you can just move your one finger over for
Yeah.
H if you want to go back.
Yes. So your resting position is always the same, and then you only move your fingers ever so slightly, like the minimal distance needed.
That's a good point. Maybe I should. Maybe I could try to. Yeah, I feel like I could probably maybe get that at some point. It is weird being off by one, and I don't know.
Yes. Yes. It's some gymnastics that you have to get used to.
Yeah, because Vim motions is always are already kind of weird because it's like there's four in a row, and it's like left, down, up, right.
Yeah. Yeah. And the reason they are in a row is because of this reason.
Yeah.
Now you learned.
Now I learned. Okay.
So
Well, yeah.
where were we on the project? I guess we were kind of
I think
done.
that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think there was anything else that I want to talk about. Do you have any other questions or things you want to know about the project at all?
No, I'm mostly just curious about like all the people who will now have to inherit this project. Um, whether
It's
they
not
will.
really like a significant part of the project. It really is just isolated to that one bonus level. So
Yeah, exactly. But maybe someone is interested, curious.
yeah. It'll inspire them to go to your talk at Unite.
Yes, smart.
I should have put something in the comments. Register for Danny's talk at Unite to learn what this means.
Yeah. It's like the documentation is just a link to the talk.
Okay. Yeah. So with that, I think we can kind of move to our final portion of the show where we do our dynamic allocation, which is the fun things that we have to share with the community. So, Danny, why don't you give a little introduction into what you wanted to share here today?
Yes, I want to share a very
Got it up
old.
here, actually.
Oh, you actually have it, right? I was just about to share my screen, but this is great.
Got you.
Yeah, it's a fairly old article. It's like 10 years old. It looks like. And it's done by a guy called Casey Moratori. I don't know. We've probably mentioned him here on the show before.
Yeah, it's. I feel like every episode we either mention Casey, Jonathan Blow, Mike Acton, all those guys.
Exactly. And one of the things Casey wrote on The Witness way back when was like the physics system and like also some of the UI and
Basically like the character
code.
controller and just making a unbreakable
Exactly.
character controller essentially.
Exactly. And one of the things he wanted to talk about is the whole like object-oriented programming situation, like people who work abstraction first instead of going and working like a compressor, thinking of your code as a compressor. Like you should not start inheriting and like have a base class. And there's a lot of interesting philosophy around like, okay, but what do you do? Well, you think sort of like a compressor. You should write code, and then you notice a pattern at some point when you start repeating code, and only after a certain amount of times that you've repeated the same code do you actually start making an informed decision on what sort of abstraction you need. Because the ultimate thing, and this is actually, now I'm going to quote someone else, which is Chris Zimmerman, like generalization should at least take 3 examples, which is something Chris Zimmerman says. The idea being that, before that, you are in a constant, like programming is a constant fight with complexity. And by, you pre-abstracting, you're going to add more complexity. And so it's way better to just, at the point at which you have noticed a couple of times, hey, this has a similar use case, then you can start actually making, the generalization. And at that point, you also now can make an informed decision on the generalization, because obviously now you have the use cases, you have the direct use cases. Leads to less error-prone code. There's some other good points in that article. I can generally recommend reading it, also because it's incredibly funny written. Like he starts by stating stuff with employees, managers. But what if you didn't have, a contractor? And what if you didn't have this other thing?
Wait, shoot. You know what? I just realized. What if we had contractors?
We
Could
definitely need a
definitely
contractor class. They're not the employees. The contractor class could inherit from the person class, because all
Yeah.
contractors are people, aren't they?
And,
That
and
would
if you've
totally
if you've
sweet.
ever heard Casey Muratori talk, I mean, you can just hear his voice in this writing right here.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
awesome.
Yeah. But then what does the manager class inherit from? If it inherits from the employee class, then we can't have managers who work on contracts. If
Just
it
that
inherits from
like
the contractor class, then we can't have full-time managers. What the fuck is going on? Like,
just like
uh,
that kind of like sarcastic but also kind of serious tone, you know.
yeah. And if you scroll down a little, I think that's one of the best phrasings he has. Is like, oh, where is it?
I'm gonna fire up my editor and get to work on some UML diagrams.
Yeah, it's right there. But then what does the manager class inherit? Blah blah blah. This is, we got a contract. If it inherits from the contract class, then we can have full-time. And this is turning it out to be a really hard programming problem, like the simplex algorithm or something. Okay, we could have a manager class both inherited. This isn't some sloppy JavaScript program, but you know what? Bam! I've got a solution right here. We templatize the manager class. We templatize the manager on the base class, and then everything works. And the manager class is templatized and on that as well. That's going to the best payroll system ever. As soon as I get all those classes and templates spec'd out, I'm going to fire up my editor again to work on UML diagrams. It's so good.
Nice.
It's so fun.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's my little dynamic allocation.
Cool. Yeah, I've definitely like heard of this article, but I haven't actually taken the time to read through it. It doesn't seem like too terribly long of a read either. So
No, it's not.
yeah,
He's mostly talking about UI throughout.
yeah, should definitely check that out. So yeah, I wanted to give a little shout out to something because I saw, I don't know if you saw this, but Backyard Sports is back. Are you familiar at all with the backyard baseball games or backyard football, backyard basketball, any of that?
No, this is totally news to me.
Dude, this is like some of the top tier games of my childhood. I'll give you a little preview here. This is kind of like their kind of like re-announcement trailer, but yeah, it's basically like I mean, it's definitely like a kid's game, but still like very nostalgic. Basically, there's all these like different kids. They all have different personalities and everything like that. And you basically like there's like a bunch of like different sports games with them. So like backyard baseball is kind of like the most famous one of these. And there's also kinds of like silly little like pitches that you can throw, and they're just like funny, silly little kids games that were real classic back in the day. So sounds like they're making a reemergence of the backyard sports here. But
I see some of the games were released in 1999, 1998, 2001, 2002, 2003, 2006. So yeah, okay, I see. They're fairly old.
yeah. The classic ones are the ones that were released like in like the late 90s here. It's like we can say
I mean, there's a chance they just weren't popular in Scandinavia slash Europe.
I mean, yeah, I'm not surprised that backyard baseball is the Europeans are not into that too much.
Yes.
So here we can here's a little Humongous Entertainment. Are you familiar with them at all?
No, I am not. No.
They did
I have not even seen the logo.
Kind of like kids entertainment games, or kids adventure games rather.
Damn, I've not seen the art style. I've not seen the logo. I know none of this.
Yeah, no, I spent hours and hours and hours on these games when I was single digit years old.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean they're fun, silly little games, so it's cool to see that they're going to be coming back in some fashion. So shout out to Backyard Sports. You can go to backyardsports.com or follow them on Twitter or whatever. But yeah, with that, we can kind of close things out here by thanking our Patreon supporters. Especially do want to give a shout out to the supporters at the CPU register tier. So thank you very much to eCool and Hakan for your generous support over there. Really do appreciate it. And so yeah, with that, Danny, you got any parting words for us here today?
No, I don't. But it's getting dark outside. I can notice that much. So
I know. It's your lighting has been dimming down slowly over the course of the show here.
Yeah. And I've been trying to like turn it up every now and again, the shutter speed, just to, I guess, turn down the shutter speed so that I get more light into the camera. But yeah.
Right.
So it's good.
Cool.
Good turning off point.
Sounds good to me. Well, yeah, with that, thank you all for joining us here for episode 30 of the Hot Path Show. I don't think we mentioned it at the top, but I do have it scrolling down at the bottom that, unfortunately we're not live here today just due to some conflicts, but I think we should be live next week. I believe it's going to be myself and Tobias talking about who knows what. But yeah.
Is that a game? Is there a game called Who Knows What?
Yes. Actually, I saw that there was a game that I think was just announced either today or recently called Redacted.
Oh.
So it's like, what's the game called? Redacted. No. Yeah, but like, what's the game called? Redacted. So, yeah. Well, yeah, thanks again, everyone, for joining us here, and we'll catch you in the next one. See ya.